Yeah, for me, the most visible thing with my disability is on nice days when I wear shorts, people can see my leg brace, which I affectionately call my Gump boot because it looks just like what Forrest Gump had on. And so I mean, at one point in my life, I was not as secure with that. I love having kids ask me about it because it is that teachable moment. And I worked so long in disability advocacy that I want to have that moment, and I want their parents to be close enough that they overhear the right thing too, because we still
that's usually the problem.
Live in a society where parents tell their kids not to stare or to look away, which just teaches that disability is wrong and bad. So, you know, Carly Findlay, who's an advocate from Australia, she wrote a book called Say Hello, which is, she has a skin disease. I'm not going to try and say the word because it's something. She's a fantastic advocate, and her point was, instead of teaching your kids to look away when someone is different, teach them to say hello. So I love it when kids ask me about the leg brace. You know, it's a way to normalize disability and just say, well, it just like a pair of glasses helps someone see. It helps me walk better. And it's something that helps me live a better quality of life. The best is when the kid asks a question, the parent gets embarrassed, tries to correct the kid, and then I get to kind of have that conversation with the parent too, like, no, it's fine. I'm happy to talk to him about it. You know, there's lots of people with disabilities out here, and you know.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Some of the best moments I've had comedy-wise, if nothing else, are questions from kids. Kids are great. I mean, they have no filter. They don't hold back, and the only time they do is when the parents really, you know, I always say when I do the disability awareness presentations, your children are not afraid of me. If you try hard enough, you will make them afraid of me. And Keith, great transition into the next set of questions. But my kids are getting to the age, and yours are as well, where their peers are asking them about what's going on with your dad, right? The sex conversation came up several months ago because one of my oldest son, one of his best friends asked him if he was adopted because he informed him that there's no way your dad could have sired you, for lack of a better word. But we are in Kentucky, so we can use that word. Yeah. And so that brought up the where my son said, so Dad, am I adopted? And I was not ready for that question. Then he asked me a very intimate question, which I had to laugh, and my wife told me I was a child. And after about 20 seconds, I got my composure and we had the conversation. And it was probably the best conversation we've ever had in that parent-child relationship. But they're getting to that point where they're answering the questions from their peers, especially the more we get involved with sports and those kinds of things. So my kids are really getting good at it. They were offended at first because they didn't know, honestly. They were to an age where they were that's just dad, and they really hadn't thought about society and how society perceived my disability. So when it got to the point where other people were asking, then that forced them to go, oh, wait. So then I started getting a lot of questions about my injury and all those kinds of things. But my kids have done a really good job with it. I think they continue to do. I think it'll always be at every level of their life when they move into a new set of friends or a new school or whatever it is, we'll have those types of questions, which is, again, I think why it's important to be as involved as you can be, physically can be. So Keith, you want to take that one? And I think our kids are close to the same age. She's starting to get those questions, and how does she deal with it?
You know, I don't know if she's getting those questions. She's not telling me.
She's getting those questions.
But a lot of times I'll get the questions directly from the kids. But you know, it's interesting what her perception is of me. You know, she sees my Gump boot every day. She knows sometimes Daddy gets headaches and we have to talk quietly before it gets worse. But you know, and when she was 2, of course, she put on my shoes, including the boot, and walked around, you know, like any kid does. But it's interesting because I told her last night, I'm going to be on this panel. I said, I'm going to be on a panel of people who are parents that have disabilities. And she looked at me and she said, disabilities? Daddy, you don't have a disability. And it was kind of eye-opening to me, because I thought for sure, like, this is old news. But I was able to have just a short conversation with her. You know, I said, well, you know, yes, I do. And that's not a bad thing. It just means that I do things differently sometimes in the world. And it really kind of hit me that she said that, because we have done a lot of work of finding books with characters with disabilities in it. And, you know, there's a book series with a princess in a wheelchair. And I mean, it's not like we're avoiding the disability world. I have friends that are deaf, and friends that use wheelchairs, and she's met all these people. And so, you know, kind of when she reacted that way, it took me by surprise, but it was a good opportunity to kind of almost start the conversation about it.
Yeah, a couple of times we dealt with that situation when, especially Mike, because my oldest son is much more emotional. My youngest son is just laid back and like just cool. Like things just don't bother this kid. But Micah was really it bothered him that other people were seeing these things. And I just said, listen, if it's too difficult a question for you, tell them to ask me. Like I can handle those questions. And so over the years, and it gets really, and Donna talked about this some too, but it gets really different when your kids get older and their friends start hanging around more, right? So we're just at that stage where we're having sleepovers and stuff like that. So that's getting to be more of an issue than it has been before, but not in a bad way. It's just something that we deal with more. Carissa, did you want to answer that question? I know your son's a little younger, but I'm sure he has questions for you.
But he's not really asked me a whole lot. About 2 weeks ago, he asked me for the first time, Mommy, can you walk? And I just said, no. Mommy uses her chair because her legs don't move like yours do. And he was like, your chair goes fast. And I said, yeah. And he was cool. So that's been the end of that. I know he's imitated me a lot. Before he could even walk very well, he's had like one of those push wagons. I guess you can throw like blocks or whatever in it. And he used to turn it around the opposite way and sit in it like it was a wheelchair. And that was how he watched his cartoons. We had a problem. He was in First Steps and early Head Start, and he wasn't meeting the developmental milestone of using stairs. And they just couldn't understand why. And I looked at him and I said, Mommy doesn't use stairs. We don't have stairs in our house. And the light bulb just went off. They didn't think about it. So, okay, you know, we need to practice that with him. Okay, well, go for it. I don't use stairs. So it's been things like that. Other than that, it doesn't faze him at this point. It's kind of nice to hear a little bit about y'all's experiences, because, you know, that is my fear about the questions he's going to get from peers. You know, and that's another reason why I want to be so involved. But, you know, I know kids can be cruel once they get older and they've been taught those norms, lack of better term. But so it's kind of nice to hear what you all have to say. But I am a firm believer in thinking we are raising the most well-rounded, the most empathetic, and the greatest kids out there, because they get to see a different experience firsthand.
Yeah, you want to say greatest kids if you were at dinner with me last night, but that's a different story. So Keith alluded a little bit a minute ago about the mentor relationship and how important it is to have somebody to look to and to bounce those questions off of. So Keith and Carissa, and I'll address this question as well, but are there any other things out there that you've used, assistive technology or organizations or literature or anything like that that has really kind of helped you, you know, with that, with the parenting relationship, has helped to make it a little bit easier? Keith, you want to? And the answer can be no. That's perfectly fine.
Not necessarily, not. Um, I have been more proactive about my mental and physical health, just because I want to be there as much as I can.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah.
So, you know, I'm always looking for ways I can be more mobile, you know, more than I was, I guess, before she was born, just because I want to be able to walk the zoo route as long as I can, or make sure there's a scooter there once I can't. So like I said, we went to Disney, and part of the process was I knew I needed a scooter. So luckily, you know, they got tons of companies down there, so I was able to have it delivered to the hotel and all of that. So I don't, not really, except just kind of basic mobility assistance things. I will say that online communities are awesome. I haven't really, well, like I said, I knew parents who had disabilities. So for me, that was a reassuring thing. But I will say on the flip side, you know, there's groups for everything on Facebook, and I'm in a couple groups for people with club feet specifically. And once a month, someone asks about being a parent, you know, who out there is a parent, you know, how bad are your feet? What are your issues? It's a hereditary disability too. So there's questions about, will my kid get this? That's something that was in my thought process when we were talking about having a kid, was, you know, and don't get me wrong, my disability is a part of me, and it has absolutely made me the person that I am. And I wouldn't really, well, I'd trade for better mobility maybe, but I wouldn't like trade those experiences for the world, because I wouldn't be the same person. But we all want our children to be better.
That's a good point.
You know, whether it's economically or anything, we all want the best for our children. So that was something that went into our thought process. And so that's something that I try to help people on when they're asking those questions in those groups, is just like, hey, you know, it's the best thing that I've ever decided to do. With a very close second of marrying my wife, if she's watching. But I mean, I wouldn't trade being a father for anything. So, you know, I say, I'm always like, go for it, you know, and with my specific disability, there's been a lot of advances since the 70s and 80s. So in the science of correcting club feet. So, but I had to look into that stuff because it was something I thought about.
Yeah, it's great. Assistive technology has been crucial for me, and definitely early on when they were babies, because that was a big thing. Like, I want to hold my child, you know, and at that most vulnerable stage is when you really feel that bond. And so we went through several variations of things. We tried a lot of things would lean me forward too much because of the weight of the baby, and made it difficult for me to drive my chair and stuff. And then we got hooked up with this guy in Pittsburgh who had developed this non-slip. It was, nothing would slip off of it. You could put a plate in your lap on this material. He developed it for the military, and swing around as fast as you could, and nothing would move. Well, the stuff on the plate would move, but the plate itself wouldn't move. So he developed a lap system where the baby could just sit in my lap. And so we'd put the carrier in my lap a lot, and that thing would go nowhere. And not in the car or anything, no, just around the house. But that was huge. And this thing was heavy, and at times it got a little cumbersome and a little tough, but that was a really cool thing. And as far as organizations and stuff, I've not really been involved specifically with any organization, but definitely reached out. I've been asked several questions over the years, and by other people, and asked to speak and stuff. And I would say, same as Keith, it's pretty rewarding. So, Krista, did you have any assistive technology you've used or anything? Or
yes, The internet's a great tool. And so I used back when we were even thinking about having kids, I used to watch YouTube videos about how, to pick up your child from the floor and how to, uh, the adaptive crib. I alluded to that a little earlier. My brother actually made something that we found on the internet. There was a group that talked about how slings were a big thing and could help you carry the baby and let your hands be free to drive your chair or whatever you needed to do. So we used a baby sling a lot. And the funny thing is, it sounds more barbaric than it is, I promise. But have you ever seen the dog harnesses? One of the mothers on this YouTube video used like a harness and hooked her child into that harness. So when the child was crawling or whatever, she could like take her hand and put it through a loop on that harness to pick him up.
Yeah.
It sounds very barbaric to the average Joe, but it works. And so in different advice to them was the type of sleepers you put them in so you have something to grab onto. I have a hard time with fine motor skills. So, just planning how I was going to dress him or anything like that. Another thing that we used, and I forget what it was called, but it was something to release the child safety seat buckle a little easier because I cannot push that button to save my life. So it's trial and error, basically. I'm in a group on Facebook right now, Mommies with CP, and they're wonderful at all stages of being a mommy, from just thinking about it to adults with grandchildren. So just having that group to be able to talk to has been great. The bumbo seat was a bit better thing for me than a high chair, and trial and error. One of the things that we did try that did not work, I have an uncle and a brother that are great about making things, was a wheelchair stroller. And so they actually welded a piece that his carrier could sit on that I could actually roll him that way because his carrier was heavy at times. But by the time we got that perfected, he was out of the carrier. So, and I used to strap him in with my seatbelt of my chair, and that would make things easier too. So, a lot of trial and error.
Yep. That's just a definition of parenting, period. So trial and error for sure. All right, Walt, I think we had some questions online.
Yeah, the question is from Natalie online. As a new graduate and occupational therapist, I would love to know if an OT helped any of you in any way in your roles as parents. And if yes, how so?
Yeah, we, the person I talked about that developed the material or whatever was actually an OT. I think he was a professor, but he was from the University of Pittsburgh, and he helped us with a lot of different things. And the good thing about that relationship is he was really open. And once we met, we became kind of good friends. So I bounced things off of him. I was lucky. My father is a bit of a engineer as well, and helped us with a lot of things. But I was pretty tied to the OT community. No assessments or anything really, but definitely have used the occupational therapy sort of idea for a lot of things. So did you all, Carissa, did you use an OT or Keith?
No, I didn't work with anybody. It was a lot of research on my own and trial and error.
I did not either.
Yeah.
This question is from Elizabeth online. Oh, Natalie says thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Question is from Elizabeth. Can you share about adaptive equipment that you use to help with care?
Our care or our children's care?
Can you share about adaptive?
The list is much more significant one way than the other.
Can you share about adaptive equipment that you use to help with care?
Probably the children's care.
Yeah. I probably describe most of what in my situation, unfortunately, my wife did most of the care. But it's other than the slings and that kind of stuff. And man, as soon as they got old enough to jump up in my lap, I'll tell you the best day, Lee Gordon said this years before, and Lee was really sort of my mentor because his daughter is about to go to college now, which is why he's not here today. She's actually going to check out Wake Forest. She's been offered a scholarship. She's one of the best field hockey players in the country. So, yeah, Olympian. That's right. Yeah, she's amazing. But he said the best day in the world, and he drives himself, was when she could get in the car and buckle her own seatbelt. Like, and it's amazing. Yeah, like you don't think of those little tiny things as being a big deal, but just like my kids now, it's like, hey, we need to go, and they grab the remote and go put the lift down, and they load themselves up and all that stuff, and that is a huge difference in lifestyle over when everything had to be done for them. So as far as specific equipment, not really. Now, if you want to know what I use, we don't have enough time, but for the kids, not much. So
Elizabeth says your children's care, but y'all answered it just now.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Do you have, Elizabeth also asked if you had resources for adaptive equipment.
I just go looking.
Yeah,
Can you share resources to find adaptive equipment?
I would probably
Google.
start, Google.
Yeah.
Google. Carissa sounds like she has a pretty good Facebook group.
Yeah.
I would, in seriousness, I mean, we do have the CATS network here in Kentucky.
Yes.
Other states have similar things. So they would be good as far as that goes. I personally feel like the most powerful resource for anything are peers,
People have done that.
which Carissa kind of touched on with her Mommies with CP. See who's done it. If you have a specific concern, connect with those people and see what they've done. I'm not knocking professionals. Our OTs and PTs are awesome too. So if you have specific concerns, and you have access to talk to someone like that, talk to them. Find out what you need first, and then, if it costs money or something, you can, I'll just make a plug here because I'm on the board of KATLC, but, Kentucky Assistive Technology Loan Corporation makes low interest loans for adaptive equipment. So there are ways, there are ways to do things on the cheap. Obviously, especially if you have handy people in your family that can build stuff, but there are, if you need something to make you successful, there are ways to get it paid for if you can't afford it.
And from a professional perspective, my answer to Natalie would be, you should be the expert, right? Like, we don't have enough people in the field that are not necessarily specializing, but are becoming, like, as far as a resource person, the fact that she's here today is a good indication that she has some interest, right? And so we don't have enough experts in the world of disability that can specifically, me and Lindsay do a lot of presentations on sexuality, and it's just not been out there, right? It's just not something that a lot of people consider when they consider disability. So there's not been a lot of research. I mean, my goodness, finding research on it sometimes it's a headache. It's just not, so we're just trying to do the research ourselves sometimes. That definitely her more than me, but I would encourage someone like Natalie to be one of those sources that we could suggest to other people. And Keith brings up maybe the best point here. As we move forward in the world is getting smaller and smaller, right? So Keith can be friends with somebody from Germany, right, that has the same disabilities he has, and they can bounce things off of each other. That's something that has allowed for these things to be more mainstreamed and more acceptance in society, those kinds of things. And we have more resources from people, because we all know that without a doubt in every situation, people are the greatest resource, right? Unless you're thirsty. And then maybe you can find somebody that's got water. I mean, it's ridiculous when you think about it, but people are the greatest resource. And for me, like, I was scared to death to be a parent, but just talking to Lee over and over again just made it doable, just in my own mind. So, and as far as finding resources, that's all we do. I mean, you have a problem, you got to figure it out. So it starts with a Google search or somebody that already has done it. So, do you have another question, Walt?
Ann online says, vocational rehabilitation can make a referral to a rehab engineer to assess adaptive equipment needs at home or in the workplace.
Yeah. But that usually wouldn't be specific to parenting, just for the simple fact that it's not work-related as under the purvey of folk rehab. But
I
yes,
asked
they can.
that resource when I was looking, and it wasn't related to employment, so they wouldn't touch it.
Right.
I guess unless you're running a daycare out of
Unless
your
you're running a
house.
daycare, yes, it could be. That's a good point. It could be related to employment. Yeah.
A wet nurse, I don't know.
Midwife. I don't.
Natalie online says, yes, I do. I found out about this from the Michigan Leadership Education and Neurodevelopmental and Related Disabilities, the Michigan LEND program that I'm a trainee in right now. I really want to get involved and become more educated regarding occupational therapy and parenting. So glad to be here.
That's great. There's, and I just learned this week, there's a national, National Center for Parenting with it, for parents of, no, I'm sorry, for children with parents with a disability, something like that. I don't know. But I had a conversation about an hour long. It's out of, what's the college in Boston? It's not Johns Hopkins. That's in Baltimore. I don't know, Brandeis University in Boston area. And I just found about that resource yesterday. And so they do tons of research based on just on parenting with a disability. So when we first talked, the other person who was involved in the conversation, it almost sounded like they were talking about children with disabilities, and they weren't. They were talking about parents with disabilities, which is a resource that I honestly did not know even existed. So, and I can give you that link if you want to send it out to everybody, because it was a pretty fascinating conversation. So, and I assume it's going to be a phenomenal resource moving forward. We already talked about ways we can collaborate and stuff. So.
Stephanie online says, is anyone a parent with a disability parenting a child with a disability? If so, can you share if that's presented any unique challenges?
My son has ADHD and significant anxiety. My oldest son does. And early on in his life, he really didn't speak at all until he didn't say mom until midway through his second year. So it's produced its own set of challenges. That is getting significantly better as he gets older. Early on, I mean, anybody who knows a child with a disability, there's a different kind of stress on the relationship of the parents. We saw that manifest several times. I have learned patience. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't still be here. But he has gotten much better, and he's just really, he's a good kid now. He was a good kid before. It was just more difficult parenting before. So, but that's about as close as I would say we are.
Yeah, my daughter doesn't currently have any disabilities.
Carissa, did you want to?
We're in the assessment phase, so the jury's still out. We're working with the behavioral specialist right now.
Okay.
Natalie says, yes, please send the link. Thank you.
And Natalie can feel free to contact me anytime she wants to. So, yeah. One other thing that we brought up before and some of our other that is the pressure that society puts on mothers over fathers. I would say Carissa probably has experienced much more discrimination being the mother than I would as the father, because I think people look at our relationship and go, well, the mom's okay, so they're probably okay, which is not fair in any way, shape, or form. So Carissa, I know you've alluded to some of the things that have been said, but can you address that a little bit about the role the mother plays in the relationship and how society sees that as probably a more important role?
Sure. Society expects moms to, like you said, your wife did all the care when they were little. Well, they expect the mother to do all the care. So I got a lot of questions in that aspect. How are you going to get up with Will during the night? How are you going to change a diaper? How are you going to do the 2 a.m. feeding and things like that? And I get those questions all the time. So it puts a lot more pressure on me personally, because even though I know that I have a partner in that, and I try to explain to people that I have a partner in that, dads aren't discounted. They expect me to do things. They expect me to go to all the parent-teacher conferences. They expect me to keep up with summer activities. They expect me to keep up with T-ball. They expect me to do all these things. And when I'm not able to do that, I've gotten, looks and stares and things of that nature about, why isn't your wife here at the activity, whatnot. Why didn't she do the snacks? I got that in T-ball last summer. I just happened to have a bad day that day and I didn't do snacks. I'd forgotten. So society expects moms to do a lot of things, and I think it's ourselves, society have to do that. So we have to be more prepared for those.
Not every time. Yeah, we're having a discussion up here. When did snacks become like the normal for all kids in sports? Like
everything.
For everything. I know. I'm 40, almost 46, and I remember very, very few snacks as a child after sporting events. So and now everybody's expected to take their turn. So
I think we all went to get ice cream after
maybe that was
the
it.
T-ball game.
Probably better. They're at least trying bananas and oranges some now. So
yeah,
we probably had a Pepsi and a hot dog or something when I was a kid. So.
He expects the concession stand candy before we leave the field. So
Actually, that sounds good to me right now. But go ahead, Walt.
Chelsea online says it may be the National Resource Center for Parents with Disabilities at Brandeis.
Thank you. I'm sure she's right. Yeah, I'm sure that's it. Yeah.
Natalie says, thank you, Chelsea. And then and then Amy online says, I appreciate the perspective of parenting children while having a disability. I'm a parent of a child that has a disability and have not heard the other perspective. So thanks for that.
Yeah, that's great. Great.
Yeah. Now, I will add real quick. My husband did get up in the night for my child and basically laid him in the bed next to me, and then it was on feed him or do whatever I had to do in the bed. So there you go.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's important to say that as far as parenting with disability, 98% of parenting with a disability is the same for every single person that has a child, right? Like the 2% is where things get difficult sometimes and things are a little tougher, but raising a child is raising a child, right? I mean, the challenge for the children is the same. I still, deal with whether or not a bully is picking on somebody or whether they lost their lunch money or, all the crazy stuff that, did you do your homework? Why is your, book bag missing? Where are your shoes? My God. My kids can lose shoes.
Why do you only have one sock on?
Why? Yes, yeah, and it's my wife's mission because we have socks literally all over our house. Like wherever they stop, that's where the socks end up. It's crazy. So, and they never can find them when it's time to go. Have you noticed that? That's always the issue. So yeah, and all parents experience the same things, right? So, while if there are no other questions, I'm gonna go ahead and let everybody give last few comments and then afterwards, if there are any other questions, we'll address those. But
sure. I mean, you can also ask if people would like to ask a question. I can certainly ask in the chat box.
Right. So if anybody else has another question, we're gonna go down the line here and just kind of give the question here. The final question is there any advice you would give to parents who are with a disability who are considering going and taking that next step? And also, if there's anything else you'd like to add to anything you've said before. And Keith, I'll let you go first.
Okay. I mean, I would say if you are someone with any type of disability and are thinking about being a parent, go for it. I mean, we are some of the most resourceful people in the world, just navigating the world around us. And I hope that people listening and participating have taken away from us that it's adaptive parenting. We're going to get it done because we love our children one way or another, and we'll find resources and we'll find ways to get around the barriers that society throws up.
Good. Carissa, same question. Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, you find people around you that have done it. We've talked about that a lot. Go for it. It's the most rewarding thing in the world, It may be the most scary thing in the world, but look where you've gotten yourself so far. So if you can get through life at this point, you can have a child. And the other thing that I would say is, thankfully, society is getting better. It's better than it used to be. So hopefully, as you go through it, it was better for you than it was me and the next generation and all of that. So I would just get us a support system and trust in what you can do, because you are your own expert.
Great. And I will add that learn to be organized is a super, you have to be good at balancing. I always said having a severe disability is you become a manager of your own life, which is having another job. When you have a child, you tack that on to the job that you're already doing outside of the job that you're doing that actually pays you money. But it is without a doubt the most rewarding thing in my life, and something that I am probably more proud of than anything else. And I freaking love them to know, for people to know that my kids are not adopted. That I think adoption is a phenomenal, amazing thing, but people just assume that that's the case. And I love to be the person that goes, So, which is great. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Dave Mathis in this presentation a little bit. Dave is, I would say, one of the 2 or 3 strongest advocates that I've ever known in my lifetime for people with disabilities. And this was his baby to start with. It's something he's been interested in a long time. And Dave was a long-time member of Voc Rehab and the independent living movement and for people with disabilities. And again, a strong advocate. And this is kind of where this all came from. And he's sort of been the glue that held us all together. And Dave and I, our goal is to write a parenting book from this group. And so I want to give a straight shout out to Dave Mathis and all the stuff he's helped, not just personally me, but everybody with over the years. So
speaking of advocates, I would be remiss if I didn't say that Kentucky right now does not have any laws in place that protect parents with disabilities. I have a friend who is with the independent living movement in South Carolina that I got to watch kind of from the sidelines as they passed that law. I guess it was 2 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think we need to do that in Kentucky too, because there are parents with disabilities out there that wake up in the middle of the night worried that their children are going to be taken away by the state. And that's no way to live.
Yeah. And if you're going to be a person with a disability with children, you better be an advocate both ways, whether you're a parent of a child with a disability or vice versa. So are there any other questions? I personally want to thank all you all for being here and everybody online. I think this is a very serious topic, but it's a very fun topic. We have lots of funny stories that we could go into if we had longer, but it's, again, I would say, very rewarding part of my life. So, yes, sir, Mr. Walt.
A participant online says, I so appreciate the experiences and courage each of you have shared with us.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. Going once, going twice. Thank you guys for being here today. And if you need anything in the future, Walt's got our contact information, and I'll be, especially Natalie, give me a call. I'll be more than happy to help out if we can in some way. All right. Thanks, y'all. Good job. That microphone too.
Thank you, guys.